Hey everybody, this is Kohdok here, and today we are going to be taking a look at the Strike Engine. This is another prototype product I have been sent. It was supposed to be here in time for my birthday, however, because of how the mail system has been in this country lately, it did not show up until recently. By the way, if folks are trying to send stuff to my P.O. box, if it's through a carrier like FedEx or like UPS or something, they hate delivering to P.O. boxes, so if you have like a tracking number, it might be a good idea to get in contact with me so I could get it redirected to a location for pickup so that I can go and grab it there. I've had that problem happen with a few packages already, so we'll try to get that figured out. Anyway, this is a Strike Engine game, and this is the Strike Engine, and like I said before, I am going to stress this is a prototype game, so you're going to see some things like some unfinished card art, some incomplete layouts. I know at least one card that the developer showed me like a couple of months ago has already had some changes to it, so he's been playtesting this game pretty aggressively. Although one thing of note about this game is that it's not just meant to be like a standalone game. What he's actually made is I've told you guys about something called the Mega License game, right? I call it the Mega License game. There are, of course, games that are licensed, which are made based on like a single property, like Star Wars Destiny was based solely on Star Wars. A Mega License game is a game like UFS, where they make a system that they then grab a number of licenses for to basically constantly build on their game to give it like new licenses to draw in more people. Probably the most famous example of that game is Weiss Schwarz, which I believe predates Bushiroad's most infamous card game. But this is a game that actually kind of turns that on its head. What this guy is doing is he's the webcomic artist for this comic here, 32 Kickup. Oh, it's written in Japanese too. He does the artwork for this game, and he sent me a demo of this because his idea is the opposite. His plan is to make a card game that is basically sort of an open source card game engine, kind of like how when you make a video game you like license the Unreal Engine. In his case, probably more appropriately, it's like the D20 system. Back in Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition, they said, all right, tell you what, we'll let you license out our system. If you want to make a game that just straight up uses our rules, you can license the D20 system and we'll let you do that. So this is something similar to that, where he's focused more on creating the mechanisms, and the idea is to then make it available for other creative types, such as, you know, other webcomic artists or people who make like indie video games or like Newgrounds animations or something like that. Give them a system that they can use to quickly and easily create their own card game. And one thing I am going to say is I've gone through the cards and the rules, and it has a lot in common with the Versus system. Now, yeah, it has a lot in common with the Versus system, although something I have to stress, in case my Duel Masters video did not make the point already, there's really no shame in developing a game based on systems that already exist. Duel Masters was made by dumbing down the systems for Magic the Gathering, and a huge number of card games, as I showed at the end, at least 12, that have done reasonably well, that were released by large companies that have had multiple years of success, were heavily based on Duel Masters. In fact, the Dragon Ball Super game, before they changed a lot of things with how like Hero Awakening works, like by adding the wish mechanic and adding some other new mechanics, it used to, the Hero Awakening mechanic used to be its reversal, but that's kind of been outmoded, so it would have had all 5. And Versus system is a pretty good choice because I have to say, what better game to base your game that's all about, you know, huge expandability and crossover potential than the game that literally has crossover as one of its mechanics. Versus system was a game that came out in 2004 that lasted until 2009. It has recently gotten a reboot as an LCG-like thing. I mean, they want to call it an LCG, but they have to call it a 2PCG, because even though Fantasy Flight put out this idea, it's like, oh, LCG, it's so amazing and aspirational, they then trademark the term LCG so nobody else can actually use it. But it's a good idea for what to base a game with universal potential on, is one like Versus system that has a lot of open places, and it does a lot of things that I think, like I said, this guy, if he's trying to make like an open source game that can appeal to creatives, that can accept a lot of different franchises, a lot of different concepts, they're definitely on the right track. They've simplified a few things from the Versus system. They've also changed up a few things. They've made resources a bit easier to manage, but they've also sort of doubled down or tripled down on secondary attributes. Let me show you here. Let's go over the Tyranny Gang here. Although this is a good example of a mock-up. This is the kind of thing that you make to show to like potential buyers. You show them, you know, this is like, it's almost finished. It's not quite finished. It's almost finished, but you can see this is a pretty good design for a box. On the front, you have like a really flashy design. You got like these guys on the front doing a team attack. You got this guy hiding out in the back. They're doing this really flashy pose, and like I said, this is by an illustrator, and I assume that he's trusting that other creatives, other illustrators who would use the system would have a similar kind of, you know, sense when it comes to layout. Although even if they don't, they've got a good example of how to do it here with all the characters. They're striking some flashy poses. It's very, very appealing. The fact that it's in black and white, that his particular design is in black and white, means it has a lot of sharp contrast. Very attractive. Definitely something that would draw attention from across the room. I might have expanded this ring a little bit, have it like actually kiss the frame. It feels like it's squelching the shape here a little bit, like the Winkler apartments. They're a bit more straight up. If it had like a background element, like some sort of compromise between these two. But we have the side here. On the back, it is currently brain salad surgery. On the back, it is currently placeholder text. It's the classic, you know, lorem ipsum placeholder text. I mean, you can let it slide a little bit, but I'd say, you know, take a couple minutes, write something silly here, explain who the Tyranny Gang are, or say something a little bit about the game. It doesn't list the contents on the back, although it is a smaller style box. It also does list the contents right on the side. Pretty easy to get. The back, like I said, is where you're supposed to sell your game. I'm seeing pictures of cards. That's definitely a help for it. This, I assume, is a QR code that will like link. This is space for a QR code that you would scan to, I assume, link to a website that lets you look at some kind of demo video or like read like some quick play rules or something. This is where the UPC code would go, but since, like I said, this isn't like a product out for sale, it does not possess one. We have the Tyranny Gang as well. It's the same story with the Winkler Apartments. Box, basically the same. So anyway, let's take a look at the contents. Like I said, this is definitely a very well done, very attractive design. The heavy use of black and white is very striking. Although some people might say it would be nice if these cards were in color, if these images were in color. In this case, it kind of gets a pass because the setting of the Tyranny Gang is old style, like really old timey style, like cartoons in a Prohibition era setting. The Tyranny Gang are a bunch of they seem to be alcohol smugglers based on the kinds of cards we're getting in here. Like I flipped straight to it. Chicago typewriter. That's clearly this character holding the gun. It's debatable whether or not this is finished artwork. Like I said, you're gonna see some unfinished artwork. I actually kind of like taking some quick peeks at unfinished artworks. In fact, there is a concept of something called a sketch card. And I don't mean like the sketch cards you get like a comic book convention where a comic book illustrator spends like 5 minutes drawing a cute little doodle on a picture card. But I mean like you take a card with its complete artwork and you make a special version of that card that has the artwork at an earlier stage. That's Exodus's idea of the sketch card. I think it's a pretty neat idea. Like I said, it would clearly be something that appeals more to enthusiasts, considering that this is a game designed to be picked up by illustrators. That might be an interesting concept. I don't know if it would appeal to everybody. It wouldn't appeal to a lot of players, but if it's like cards that are like important or iconic, people will be like, oh hey, sketch card. It's like a bonus copy of this card that I really want. But you know, they'd be like chase cards, the kind of cards that exist for fans, etc. But anyway, moving on. These guys work in black and white because it is, like I sauld, it's old-timey cartoons in a speakeasy setting that works fairly well in black and white. Although, I imagine there are still plenty of people who would be like, hey, it would be cool to see these characters in color. but like I said, this is still like the prototype deck phase. If they're gonna add color cards or not, it might be a bit interesting. So the goal of the game, like I said, it's very similar to Versus system. The goal of the game is to deplete your opponent's endurance to 0 from its starting total of 30, and you do that by attacking them with character cards. These character cards can also attack through other character cards. They can attack other character cards directly if they get blocked, but they manage to deal more damage. They're defenders. They inflict breakthrough, which is, you know, trample damage, piercing damage, whatever you want to call it. So they deal the remaining damage through. A lot of games use that. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has the piercing damage to attack position monsters. Mitos y Leyendas has the damage that goes to the castle, etc., etc. So starting off, we have this fun little card that is reminiscent of the original, and on the back we have a deck list. So what this game is actually themed after set deck games. So we have 75 cards in here. 75 cards in here, I assume. Do these tokens count? 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not sure how many of these other elements are included in here, but it has what it does is it gives you full play sets of every card in the set, but it also comes with a recommended starter. Now, like I said, again, this is meant to be like merchandise for like a small time production. You don't want to necessarily do like a big rollout of like cards and booster packs and starter decks and all of this big expensive merchandise for something that is meant to be a bit more of an entertainment small fry as opposed to an entertainment juggernaut like Pokemon. So making it like this, where it can be like games printed in small batches or even printed on demand, that's not a bad system for a card game. Even if people just buy it for use as merch, having a game that is sort of printed like short printed or printed on demand or something like that can definitely work. Like for people who are like longtime fans of a series, they'll probably buy it just as merch just to have the cool cards. But anyway, so here we have our character card. Let's look at O'Brien the Clown. So one thing I pointed out is secondary attributes. You have two kinds of attributes in a card game. You have primary attributes and you have secondary attributes. Primary attributes have a gameplay rule attached to them. These are things like the colored mana symbols in Magic, the energy types in Pokemon. Those have a rule attached to them. Secondary attributes are attributes printed on the card explicitly to be brought up again in card text. So for example, O'Brien, he has Tyranny Gang, Grounded, Mind, Toon, Lizard, Rogue. So he has a lot of secondary attributes. They put a lot of secondary attributes possible. Like it has 2 rungs for secondary attributes in this game. This is versus the Versus system, which usually has like maybe a couple of attributes. Like Spider-Man here has the Avengers attribute. They don't tend to include many more than like 1 or 2. But by having so many, you could have like crossover cards. You could have cards like you could have cards from another series that mentions Lizard. For example, if they made like an Undertale card game, heaven forbid, you could there's some Lizard characters in that game that would maybe benefit from cards that specifically affect lizards. So O'Brien is also Tyranny Gang, and that's a secondary attribute because it works with cards that mention Tyranny Gang. For example, the resource card, Chicago Racketeering. Now, the resource cards are where they really do a twist on the Versus system. Now, the Versus system is an any card as resource game. You have certain cards that you play face down. You can play any card from your hand face down that act as resource cards. They also have location cards that in the old game, you actually could flip face up at a later turn. I know in the new game, a lot of these resources are one-shots, which provide a resource to use a superpower, but you flip that resource face down after you use the superpower. This works a little bit differently. While all of the cards are any card as resource, they all have a flat cost that can be paid for with any resource. What these other special resource cards do is they produce special resources. Like you can see how O'Brien has an ability over here that costs 2 resource and 1 ambition resource to activate some kind of special ability. There are also characters who have alternative costs. For example, Clara Tierney here. So she has a flat cost of 6, but if you pay her alternative cost, she for 3, 1 ambition and 1 might, you're essentially pay her for a bit cheaper. There are also ones that let me see if there are any in here. yeah, like Cagney, his converted cost is the same. It's 5 flat, but also 5 converted, but he gets a kicker cost. If you paid his alternate cost, create 2 uncouth mook tokens. Now, this is something I have to mention this here. Normally, if a card game causes you to create tokens, normally you want to say the rules of those tokens on here. However, because this is a fixed game where you get a set number of cards, they just print the tokens that go in it, so you can just pull it out. So this is like a free, like, chump blocker, just a quick little 2/2, just a cheap little grizzly bear, which on turn 5 might not be as useful as a regular grizzly bear would be. So like I said, it's all to just invoke the card text. Like this, if you play only if you control a Tyranny Gang character. So it's a special multi-type resource, but you can only play it if you have a Tyranny Gang character already in play. So this is the kind of stuff you can do with secondary attributes. Make it so that certain cards have play limits or special abilities depending on how many you have in play. There is another cool element in this game, which is in all games, in a lot of games, they have something that is called the unique mechanic. For example, if I put Spoiler into play, I can't have like a second copy of Spoiler in play because in universe there's only one Spoiler. Essentially, it is the legend rule across the entire spectrum. So if I have one copy of Margaret out, I could not play another copy of Margaret. In Versus system, you can play a new copy. It just forces your old copy to be dropped, and that exists in this game as well. However, there is another mechanic called Level Up, which is you could play a character of a higher cost, replacing the old one. They gain all of the stats on the old one, like all of the cool power-ups, all of the damage, which means that if you have a character who's just a mess and has all sorts of damage on them, you might want to just kick them instead. But you then pay the difference. So in this case, Margaret Mystic Queen would only cost 2 if I level her up from Margaret the Star, meaning I could play Margaret Mystic Queen a turn early. Another example would be O'Brien. I think there's another O'Brien in here. Yeah, there's a level 4 O'Brien. So if I played the level 1 O'Brien on turn 1, on turn 3 I could play O'Brien Swift Hands a turn sooner. Another thing it borrows from the Versus system is the concept of damage. Now, the Versus system from the beginning has the power and toughness stats you see in Magic. It works the same way. Power is how much damage you do, toughness is how much damage you can take, but something introduced in a recent addition in the more recent edition. But one thing they added is called the health mechanic. So what happens is, if Margaret and O'Brien fought each other, they would both deal enough damage to knock each other down, which causes the character to turn sideways, as though they were exhausted if they were attacked when they weren't exhausted. And they also each gain a damage token to them. The game doesn't come with damage tokens. I assume, like I said, this is a mock-up. There's not even a rule book in here. Like I said, that's because I assume this is a mock-up. You can't always get a rule book added to a mock-up. That's not the easiest thing to do. There are some rules cards in here. You have an initiative card, you have some reminder cards in here, and they're two-sided, which you'd think would be a pain. It's like, oh man, I have to constantly flip them over. But then you remember, between two players, you have a full set of cards. So pretty straightforward there. So they have an HP limit. So what happens is, if they get defeated in a power struggle, they don't just immediately go away. Instead, they take a wound, and you have to have as many wounds on them as they have HP for them to finally go away. So it's a mechanic where you have essentially like the creatures from Magic the Gathering, but with an added level of stamina that allows them to withstand the rigors of typical combat. Of course, you also have the special moves, and have I pointed out the varying card backs here? Yeah. So you have these cards. They're technically universal, but they have cards that specifically target other relevant cards. For example, this is a move that Margaret and only Margaret can use. There's also something called the carry mechanic, where a character can essentially carry another one, essentially act as a bodyguard. Like, if I have a character in play with a useful passive effect, like if I had Mr. Tyranny in play, he has a useful passive effect that causes opponents' costs to be more expensive, I might want to protect him, because you can target characters for attacks in this game, so I might want to have him be carried by his daughter over here, Clara Tyranny, because she has really beefy stats, and they basically have to defeat Clara to get at Mr. Tyranny. There is a blocking system where you can set out blockers if they choose to attack a character, but carrying does it a bit better. It's designed to tie into the vehicles. These work like Magic's vehicles. It can't like perform combat unless there's a character carrying it, like Mr. Tyranny in his luxury automobile. Might be a good choice. There are also some resource cards that have like a one-shot effect. Like you have Stubborn Drive, that's a universal one. It's played for free, and you can then flip it to use it as a cool, quick little buff, a quick little one-shot, but then you lose its ability to use its special resource. It still stays a resource, but you lose the special one it can use. So it becomes an interesting trade-off where you get a useful freebie, but you do lose something in your resource variety. Like I said, there's a lot of interesting concepts here. Let's see, Ill-Gotten Gains does kind of the same thing. So yeah, there are resources that have additional attributes. Like this is a resource item. You can also have like a resource character, I believe. Resource Ongoing is Chicago Racketeering. Resource Character in Bourbon Dealer. He goes in your resource row, but I guess he can be attacked for damage. He produces tokens, so he can be attacked. This is a bit like if they tried to make like the Black Lotus was also a creature, so you couldn't use it the turn you play it, and an opponent could do any number of things to destroy it. Useful and interesting concept. So like I said, I think when it comes to developing a game that can have a lot of potential, I'm also seeing tags like Toon and K9 and Brawler. I mean, there's like various forms of fighting. There's like mind fighting, tough fighting, speed fighting. Grounded is a type of combat, I guess, grounded or flying. Although it's kind of weird. Isn't Margaret supposed to be a bat? Yeah, she's a bat, but she's grounded. That's weird. Is she like Donald Duck in that she's technically a flying creature, but she can't fly? I wonder if she's resentful about that at all. But yeah, like I said, this is definitely in the right direction for wanting to make a game that has a lot of crossover potential. It's not finished. Like I said, this is a prototype. I'll put a link in the description to the guy who's been making it to the webcomic. I haven't read the webcomic. I can't rate its safety for families, but it does involve. Clearly, it involves like gangster activity, you know, like Prohibition era stuff. There's a card based on the Thompson submachine gun, so kind of gives you the idea of the kind of vibe you're getting. But like I said, if folks want to connect their IP to a game and maybe don't know where to start, this might not be a bad idea. I'm not sure if he's doing it as a license or if he's doing it straight up open source. We'll have to find out. I think his idea was to make it open source and just take a cut of like the printing costs, a cut of the sales. It'll be interesting to see if this goes anywhere, where we have a game that is all about, you know, like short printed, like exclusive cool items to play. In which case it will have to stick to like a limited print format rather than a booster print format. The way he described it is he wanted it to be okay to like create your own sort of game with like its own power curve and stuff like that. Although I'd still say, you know, try to see if you can get like a version that works across the way, kind of like what they have with like Weiss Schwarz, where it works and is compatible with the other like standard sets. Like maybe have like a special like Strike Engine sanctioned logo that goes on the box to say, hey, these cards are that goes in the box or somewhere in the card that say, hey, these cards are compatible with other Strike Engine games as opposed to a standalone. But yeah, this was fun. Thanks for sending me these. This was fun to looking at like a lot of the cards that are sketchy, a bit incomplete. Like I said, this is clearly like the prototype step where the cards are like not quite finished. Like I said, I personally like seeing these kinds of things, but then again, I'm the kind of guy who enjoys seeing how the sausage gets made. I imagine it'll look a lot nicer when it's finished. Although if you want to look at some more, like this is exactly how a step 1 of a card looks. If you want to see some more, some of the folks who illustrate on Mitos y Leyendas, I know did like some basic slideshow time lapses of some of their artwork. I'd like to see if any of them do like straight up time lapse. I know Clip Studio Paint recently added a time lapse function, so we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, this is the strike engine. There's a look at the back of the card. And I hope you guys had fun. Until next time, this is Kohdok signing off. Oh hey, welcome to the credits. Turns out I missed a couple of things. Turns out there are special cards called Epics. I assume these are 1 per deck. They have a very powerful and game-changing effect, which is why I assume there's only 1 of these per deck. There actually is color on these art cards as well. That's whenever the card has like blood, it's got some color to it. Very, very noir, very dark. So yeah, see ya.